So students, welcome to today's class. Today we are going to discuss some of the basics of distributed storage, distributed transactions, and then we are also going to start discussing computing topologies. So maybe in the next class, we are going to discuss the computing topologies and your memory access technologies like uniform memory access and non-uniform memory access. So in this class, specifically, we are going to discuss the introduction of distributed storage and the few details regarding distributed transactions. So first let us start distributed storage. So the aim of distributed storage is to store the data on multiple standard servers or places, which behaves as one storage system, although data is distributed between the server. So the motto over here is whatever data we have got or whatever storage we want to have, all those things are being placed at many places. For example, this may be our network, and in this network we may have a number of systems. Let's say this is a system, this is a system, and this is a system, right? And all the systems are connected with a network. And now somebody else is there who is trying to access this data. Okay, so this person will get the illusion that he is interacting with a single system, not with a bunch of systems. So this is the aim of having distributed storage, one of the aim, where the client perceives that he is interacting with a single system. However, at the backend, that data may be scattered through various systems, and then when required, that data will be collected and then will be passed on to the requested client. Okay, so this is one of the things. Apart from that, it may possible that one of the system may get failed. So in that case, how that data is going to be retrieved by the client. So we have to also consider fail-safe mechanism. So if in case some of the node gets failed, then how to retrieve the data or how that data can be provided to the client or any system who is requesting for it. So we can see how we can manage that sort of situation. So that sort of situations can be managed by replicating the data. So one solution can be that that's the data which was there with this node has also been placed with some other nodes. Okay, so in case this gets failed, then that data can be retrieved from this node as well. So this is called as a replication management. Okay, so this is some of the aims of distributed storage, where we are not depending on any single node. So in case if one of the node gets failed, then other nodes will kick in to solve the job or to solve the purpose. Okay, so here over here we attempt to offer the advantages of centralized storage, and with this the advantages which we are going to have are the scalability and the cost base of local storage. So the moment we want to increase our storage capacity, so we can increase it. So this is the beauty of distributed storage. So if we are having only a single system, so we will be confined with the storage capacity of the system. But with this distributed storage, the moment we are in the need of some more storage space, then some more nodes can be added to this network, because this person is going to get the illusion that he is interacting with a single system only. So as per the requirement or as the need goes up, we can add the extra storage as well to our uh, resource pool. Okay, so over here the moment we talk about distributed, that means we are talking about distributed data storage or store, or sometimes it is also called as a distributed databases, and sometimes it is also called as a distributed file system. So uh, specifically, if you talk about distributed file system, then there are various examples of it. For example, network file famous one, and then AFS Andrew file system. Then GFS is also one of them. Google file system. Then one more file system is there, which is very famous, Hadoop distributed file system. So you guys can take all these file system as an assignment. Okay, so you can just study them and you can know them. So these file system may come in the examination as well, in the end examination. So this will be the part of the assignment to all. So all of you need to study them. That's it. Okay. So if we talk about the access and performance of distributed storage, then this can be evaluated with the help of the bandwidth and the latency. So bandwidth means how much data can be passed or retrieved at a time, and latency means how much time it is taking, right? Then at what place our data is actually has been stored. So that will be defined by the compute location. Then the flash technologies in case if you, so how exactly that can be done. Okay. Then the protocols. So what file type storage uh, is there? So there can be three types of protocols. The first one is file storage, the other one is object storage, and the third one is block storage. And how much time it is going to take will totally depend upon the location of that data. So it is less likely the application will tolerate high latency and or low bandwidth. So in case, in short, closer the data, low will be the latency. And if the data has been placed far away from the request, then you can say that it is going to have the high latency. So it totally depends that where that particular data has been placed. Then data security and privacy. We talk about data security. That means we are trying to make sure our data where only the right persons or systems are going to access our data. And privacy means that the data is not going to be misused. Apart from that, what security measures can be taken? The measures like, yes.
Sorry, sir. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Many of the students in MTech are unable to see and hear the voice of your voice, sir.
My voice, they are unable to hear.
And both slide as well, sir.
You can see it, right?
Yes, sir. I can see, sir.
Okay. Again. Now is it visible to all of you, students?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay. So security means we are trying to make sure that the right persons or the right peoples are only having the access to the data. Okay. And the security measures which we can take, like the identification and authentication of the systems, so only authorized and the authorized person will be having the access to the data. Apart from that, we can also have the provisions of encryptions, so that in case if our data has been captured by the uh, unauthorized person, even after that they will be unable to read the data, right? So end-to-end encryption can also be there. Apart from that, storing data in the right place and knowing how it is managed. So these things can also be there. So these are some of the measures which can be taken care of. Apart from that, as we have discussed, that there can be three types of storage, which are block storage, file storage, and object storage. In file storage means we are storing the files in a single piece. So it will be treated like this. So all the things, all the data are being stored in the form of a file. Whereas in case of block storage, all the files or whatever data we have got, that data is being chopped out into number of pieces, and those pieces are called as a blocks. And in case of object storage, we treat each and every type of data in the form of the object. So it will be containing your metadata, all the properties, all the attributes. So it will be very much helpful when the size of the data grows considerably. So it depends upon the type of application, what sort of uh, storage type you are going to use. So this is how you can define them, that in file storage, the data is stored as a single piece of information inside a folder, like the way we deal with the folders in a typical way. And in case of your block storage, the data is divided into number of smaller pieces, and those pieces are called as a blocks, and then usually we store them as a separate pieces. And over here the important thing is that each and every block is going to have their unique identifier. Okay, and it allows a storage system to place these smaller pieces of data wherever is most convenient. Okay, so the smaller the size of data, it will be much convenient to store them, right? And in object storage, as discussed, that the data is broken into discrete units called the objects and is kept in a single repository. So it depends upon the application, what sort of data file or the data storage mechanism one should choose. Apart from that, the obvious goals of distributed storage systems are going to be flexibility, how flexible they propose distributed storage is going to be, thereafter what speed it is going to offer, then what is the cost it is going to incur. So these are the three primary goal of having any distributed storage system. Apart from that, these may be the criteria to evaluate and categorize the system. This can be the partitioning, where it will define how exactly the system is going to manage the distribution of data across the node. So how the data is going to be broken, and then how the data is going to be managed across the number of nodes. So this can be one of the criteria. And the another one, if in case the data has been modified, then how that modification is going to be handled inside the data storage system. Then how we are going to read or access the data, or how efficient that data is available, or you can say what is the uptime of that data if a particular type of distributed storage system has been offered, and what is the consistency, how consistent we can access the data. So this can be one of the criteria. And apart from that, it also depends upon the applications. So on what applications we are going to use that type of data storage. Okay, so these are some of the criteria that can be applied in order to detect that what storage system can be used. Now the second topic which we are going to discuss in today's class is distributed transactions. So if we talk about distributed transactions, then again there are going to be number of interaction in between the number of components which are there in a system, and then we have to come up with a solution where all follow the atomicity property. If you remember in database systems, what is atomicity, right? So either all should commit or all should abort. So in transaction there is no half measures, right? So whatever things are being done, if there are n number of systems in the network or in a system, then all n systems have to agree upon that decision. Okay, so if they are trying to accomplish some task or they are trying to perform some transactions, then either all have to commit the transaction or all have to abort the transaction. So we call them as a commit protocols. So a transaction which executes at multiple sites must either be committed at all sites or aborted at all sites. So this is the basic philosophy of the commit protocols. And in case it has not been acceptable to have a transaction committed at one side and aborted at another. So it may possible that we may have got n number of sites like this, and one of them has decided to abort the transaction. So in that case, all the other side will also decide to abort the transaction. So this is what we mean by the property of atomicity. So it makes sure either all the effects of transition persist or non-persist. Fine. Then there are three types of commit protocol: one-phase commit protocol, two-phase commit protocol, and three-phase commit protocol. So in the one-phase commit protocol, it involves a coordinator which periodically communicates with the servers and that are carrying out each individual transactions in order to inform them whether the transition or about it. So let us just try to understand this one with an diagram. So let us say we have got number of nodes, right? And in this case, we have assigned some job to all the servers, right? And then all these servers says, okay, we are going to do that job. Fine. And moment they get the information from these participants, so first of all, we need to arrange the system which consists of n nodes. So one of the system will be designated as a coordinator. Okay, so first we have to assume that we have got n number of systems. So in this example, we have got 4 systems or 4 nodes, and one of the nodes have been designated as a coordinator. So it is the job of the coordinator to look after all the things. So let us say this particular node is a coordinator, and then has to decide whether to commit or abort. So what this node will do, this will ask from each and every participating servers that you need to do this job. Okay, so then the participant confirms, okay, we are ready to do this job. Fine. And then when server assign them a job to commit or to abort, it may possible that one of the participant may get failed, okay, or may face some problem or may face some deadlock. So in this case, this particular system who is acting as a coordinator will not be able to find out what wrong has been happened, since these systems have already sent their confirmation earlier that they are going to perform this job. So this is the working of one-phase protocol, and this is the difficulty which this particular protocol face. Okay. So this has been discussed, and then we come to the two-phase commit protocol. So in two-phase commit protocol, let us again go with the help of example. So this will be very good. So in case of second your two-phase protocol, again in a system we have assigned one of the system as a coordinator and other system as participants. So initially what a coordinator node will be doing, it will be sending a request to prepare. Okay. And thereafter all the participating nodes will be sending a message that they are prepared to perform that job. Then the coordinator will request to commit, and then they will say or they will send a done message, right? So if this sequence happens, then we can say that a commit is going to happen. And how the abort can happen? When the coordinator sends a request to prepare, and where one of the participants says say that no, I'm not ready to. So in this case, the coordinator will send abort message to all, and then all the participants are going to follow that. That whatever instruction has been received, all the participants are going to do it. Okay, because one of them has said no, so this will happen then. Is that clear? So this is all about your two-phase protocol. And now what is the problem with two-phase protocol? Over here we can see that coordinator is playing very important role. So what will happen in case the coordinator get failed? So in case the coordinator gets failed, then let us again try to understand this one. So in case if a coordinator gets failed, then the overall system will also get failed, because in this the participating nodes are not going to know that the it is okay. So in this case, the participating nodes are not going to know about the failure status of the coordinator. So if in case they have sent their consent that they are going to do this job, then they will be waiting for the commit message from the coordinator. Okay, and it may possible that they may wait for that commit message for the indefinite time. So in three-phase commit protocol, the things have been divided into three phases. In the first phase, the coordinator will send a message that can you commit? Then the participating nodes will be replying, okay, yes, we can commit. And then a pre-commit message will be sent to all. Then again, one acknowledgement will be sent by all the participating nodes to the coordinator. And then the final commit message will be sent to all, and in response all the participating nodes will be sending that they have committed it. Okay, and the problem which I was talking about, to handle that problem, at least k number of participating nodes has to know the last status of the coordinator sign. Okay, for example, uh, it has just sent that can you do this job. They will send okay, we can do this job, and then the moment pre-commit, okay, so it may possible that it has sent the commit message to this one, but it failed while sending to this one, it failed while sending to this one, and it failed while sending to this one. So in this particular variety of commit protocol, the moment the coordinator gets failed, and in case before failing it has sent any communication to one of them, then in the next stage the node who has got the commit message from the coordinator will then be used in order to pass this information to other nodes that he has received the message from the coordinator to commit it. So all the other three nodes will be utilizing this information to agree upon the commit. So this is how it happens. Okay, so in case it gets failed and some of the participating node has got a message, then that information will be passed to the other remaining one. Okay, so this is why we are telling it that at least k sides should know about the decision of the coordinating node. So this is how your three-phase protocol works. And the next topic which I was about to discuss, and that is various computing topologies. So I'll discuss this one in the next class. So I'll stop the class here only.